All right, let's dive into French register. We'll make sure you're ready for that pronunciator certificate you're working towards.
Excellent.
It's basically how you adapt your French, depending on, who you're talking to and how.
Right.
Like picking an outfit, right? You wouldn't wear a ball gown to grab coffee, would you?
Exactly. And in French, that outfit is even more important because the language is so, formal.
Okay.
Knowing when to use to instead of vous, or how to handle verb conjugations, or even when to slip in a slang word, it can really make a difference, make you sound like you really know French.
So it's not just grammar rules, it's like cultural fluency too.
Yeah.
I'm already interested.
What's interesting is even those who've been learning French for a while, register can really trip them up. For instance, thinking you're being polite with a certain word, but it actually comes across as super formal or even, stuffy.
So it's all about getting the right feel for the language.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot where your language is just right.
All about understanding the nuances, like the hidden rules of the game. Okay, I'm ready to up my French game. Let's start with that classic formal versus informal. I know the basics, like using vous for formal situations and tu for informal ones, but where does it get, complicated?
You'd be surprised how often even advanced learners mess this up. It's not always clear-cut, like with age or authority.
Right.
What about colleagues who are about the same age?
Okay.
Do you stick with the formal vous to keep things professional or switch to tu to be friendlier?
I see.
And then there's online communication. It's always changing. Is a Facebook message to someone you just met formal or informal?
Yeah?
These are the gray areas that get interesting.
I see what you mean. It's those in-between situations that get you. So I guess there aren't always hard and fast rules, are there?
Not always, no. Context is key. You need to think about your relationship with the person, where you are, and even the overall tone of the conversation.
Right.
Sometimes you have to read between the lines, pick up on those social cues.
Feels like I need a crash course in French etiquette. Are there other pronoun traps we should be careful of?
Oh, yes. Those demonstrative pronouns, ceci and cela. The ones we use to point to things.
Okay, yeah.
In spoken French, people use them almost interchangeably, but in formal writing, using the wrong one is a big mistake.
Oh, really?
It's like wearing mismatched socks with a suit.
Oh.
Ceci is for something you're about to say, while cela refers back to something already said.
So using cela when I should use ceci could make my writing seem, careless.
Exactly. It's a small thing, but it shows a lack of attention to detail, which isn't good in formal situations. It's like the difference between a polished essay and a quickly scribbled note.
Got it. Details matter.
Yeah.
You mentioned verb conjugations earlier. I know they change depending on formality, but is it just switching a few endings?
If only. Some changes are straightforward, yeah, but others are more subtle. For example, the conditional mood can be tricky.
Right.
It can show politeness or uncertainty, which are important when being formal.
But using it wrong can make you sound unsure of yourself, which isn't good, say, in a professional setting.
So it's not just knowing the rules, but how to use them to set the right tone, like persuading someone with grammar.
Precisely. And that's the challenge. It's about going beyond memorization and really understanding how grammatical structures work to create meaning.
Okay.
And have an impact.
All right, so pronouns and verbs covered.
Yeah.
What about those little words that pop up in conversations, the fans and quoi, that can make you sound either totally natural or totally out of place?
Yes. Those discourse markers, they're like the spice in spoken French. They add flavor and personality.
Okay.
But like spices, you have to use them carefully.
Right.
A bit of quoi at the end of a sentence can make things informal and friendly with friends.
Yeah.
But in a formal setting, it can sound dismissive, even rude.
Gotcha. So know your audience and how much spice is right. I'm starting to see register everywhere. And that's just the start. We haven't even touched on negation, the subjunctive mood, or those stylistic touches that make formal written French an art form.
Don't worry, listeners. We're just getting started. We'll be back to explore those fascinating topics in more detail.
Let's talk negation, a grammar point that often trips up learners. Ne pas, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, did you know that in spoken French, especially informally, that ne often disappears?
Oh, yeah, I've noticed that. It sounds more natural, more casual, but it feels almost wrong leaving out a whole word like that.
It does feel like breaking a rule, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that's language, always changing, and spoken language adapts to, how we actually talk. Imagine trying to say je ne sais pas over and over quickly.
Yeah, it's clunky, right?
It is. Je ne sais pas is so much easier to say.
Exactly.
But I probably shouldn't do that in my pronunciator exercises or on the certificate test. Probably not, no. Formal written French is stricter about those rules. It's like the difference between, say, a choreographed dance and just freestyling. Both have their place.
Right.
But you wouldn't freestyle in a ballet.
So spoken French is about efficiency, being expressive, while written French is all about precision, elegance.
Exactly. Which brings us to a grammar point that's all about that elegance, the subjunctive mood. People see it as difficult, but I think it's beautiful.
I have to admit, the subjunctive is still a bit intimidating. Why is it so common in formal writing?
It's about expressing those subtle shades of meaning that are, well, so French. Doubt, desire, possibility, obligation, emotions. The subjunctive captures them in a way other moods can't.
So it's not just a rule, it's about a mindset, a perspective.
Precisely. It adds a whole layer of depth to your writing, like choosing a specific brushstroke to get a certain effect in a painting.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it. Can you give us an example, see how it worked in practice?
Sure. Let's say you're expressing a wish. In English, you might say, I hope it works out. But in formal French, you'd use the subjunctive. J'espère que cela marche. Just changing the verb adds that elegance, that sense of uncertainty, of hoping for something.
So grammar becomes a way to paint a more vivid picture with your words. Okay, I'm starting to see why the subjunctive is so cool.
And it's not just sentences on their own. The subjunctive connects clauses, creates those complex sentences you see in formal French writing.
Like those beautiful, intricate sentences that make French literature so captivating.
Exactly. It's like an architect using arches and vaults to create a soaring cathedral.
Okay, you've convinced me. The subjunctive is officially on my list of grammar goals. But let's switch gears a bit, talk about something more everyday. Idioms. I love how they add color, personality, but I'm always scared to use them, worried I'll sound, awkward.
Idioms are tricky, that's for sure. They can make your French sound authentic, lively, but use the wrong one or use it in the wrong situation, and it has the opposite effect.
So how do you know when it's okay to use one?
Context. Who are you talking to? What are you talking about? What's the overall tone? A casual chat with friends. Great time to use idioms.
Yeah.
A formal business meeting, maybe not the best place for avoir un poil dans la main.
Got it. Definitely noting that one down. So what are some other common mistakes people make with idioms?
One is taking them literally. They often have meanings that are different from the individual words. So, se casser la tête doesn't actually mean to break your head.
Oh, right.
It means to rack your brains, to worry too much.
I've definitely made that mistake.
Yeah.
I once tried to use être dans la lune to say someone was daydreaming, but I accidentally said être sur la lune, which means to be on the moon. I got some confused looks.
A classic mistake. It shows how important it is to understand not just what an idiom means, but how to use it correctly. A little change in a preposition or verb tense can change everything.
It's all in the details, just like with grammar rules. Mastering French really is a never-ending journey.
It is, but that's what makes it so interesting. Always something new to learn, a new nuance to explore.
Well, I'm feeling inspired to keep going with my French. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on one more thing. Writing. I'm working on getting my certificate on French grammar using Pronunciator, and I know the written part is important. What should I keep in mind?
Great question. Formal written French has its own world, with conventions and style that are different from spoken language.
Yeah, okay.
We'll dive into all those details after a short break. Stay tuned.
We're back and ready to tackle formal written French.
Yes, let's.
I'm excited to hear your advice, especially since I'm prepping for that written part of the Pronunciator French Grammar Certificate.
Formal written French, it's like stepping into a grand ballroom. There's an elegance to it, a precision, a certain something that sets it apart from everyday talk.
I like that image. So it's more than just avoiding slang or contractions. It's a whole different way of thinking about writing.
Exactly. Imagine you're crafting a perfectly tailored suit. Every word, every phrase, every comma, it all has its place, its purpose. It's about creating a piece of writing that's polished, flows well, and not only gives information, but shows you've mastered the language.
Attention to detail is key. What are some of the things that really set formal written French apart?
Vocabulary is a big one. Formal writing prefers more precise words, often those with Latin roots, instead of shorter, more Germanic ones. Like instead of montrer to show, you might use démontrer to demonstrate.
So it's like elevating the language, using words that fit the seriousness of the topic.
Exactly. And this applies to verbs, too. Formal written French uses literary tenses more, like the passé simple, which you rarely hear spoken, but it adds that sophisticated touch in writing.
It's like adding a vintage detail to a modern outfit, a little nod to tradition.
Exactly. Speaking of elegant, let's talk sentence structure. Formal written French loves those complex, well-built sentences that flow smoothly and logically. You'll see those intricate clauses, elegant transitions, variety of sentence structures to create a kind of rhythm.
So it's like composing music with words, everything working together harmoniously.
A beautiful way to put it. And just like a conductor, the writer guides the reader, making sure everything is clear and makes sense.
This all sounds pretty intense. Are there any tips to help us navigate formal written French?
Of course. One tip is to read formal French. Immerse yourself in well-written texts like literature, academic papers, even formal letters. Pay attention to the words, the sentences, the overall style. You'll start to absorb those patterns, and it'll influence your own writing naturally.
It's about letting the language soak in and shape how you express yourself.
Right, and don't be afraid to really analyze those texts. Break them down, see what makes them formal. It's like taking apart a masterpiece to see how the artist did it.
I like that, like getting a masterclass in writing from the best. Are there any other style elements that are specific to formal French writing?
Oh, absolutely. Rhetorical devices. Formal written French using techniques like metaphors, similes, rhetorical questions to make the writing more persuasive and impactful.
So it's about using language not just to inform, but to make the reader feel something, get them curious, really engage them.
Exactly. You're turning information into an experience. And this is where mastering register gets really exciting. You're using the power of language to create art, to persuade, to inspire.
This has been an incredible deep dive into French register. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the language, and I'm definitely feeling more prepared for that written part of the pronunciator certificate exam. Any last bits of wisdom for our listeners on their French language journeys?
Remember, language is alive. It's always evolving, changing with new situations and influences. Embrace the challenge, keep learning, and never stop exploring the beauty of French.
Well said. And to our listener getting ready for that French grammar certificate, we wish you all the best. Bon courage. And remember, the world of French is waiting for you.
À bientôt.
À bientôt.